Hi, I'm Derek Ashong, and you are now in The Stream, a social media community with its own daily TV show. We're bringing you stories that are ongoing, global, and sourced from social media. Today, Jordanians discuss reforms through hashtag debates, and netizens in Turkmenistan fight back against an internet blackout to report mysterious explosions. Our digital producer, Ahmed Shahab Al-Din, is here with your feedback. Joining us on the couch today is May Al-Hassan, a blogger and performer. You participated in the Hijabi monologues about the stories of Arab American Muslim women. You also worked on the Malcolm X project. Talk to us a little bit about that.
The Malcolm X project, I worked on it for 2 years at Columbia University with the late Manning Marable, and I looked at Malcolm X's relationship to Arab, Islamic, and African leaders.
And what did you learn about that relationship?
I mean, it was fascinating because Malcolm X was really entrenched in the politics of the region. He was starting to learn about it, and he was actually conversing with high-up political players. He knew the creme de la creme of the Arab world.
That's amazing. It seems like the work that you and Dr. Marable and others were doing in this arena has really brought him to the forefront in this time. We really appreciate having you here. We will look forward to some of your academic insight into our topics of the day. Remember, we want to know what stories you are following as well. You can tweet them to us using the hashtag AJStream.
Hi, I'm Salim Elias from Iraq. I'm participating in an exchange program, social media, and we are in Stream now.
While much of the Middle East and North Africa have been swept up in revolutions, Jordan has managed to avoid the full force of the Arab Spring. Large and at times violent protests in early 2011 have now turned into small weekly demonstrations outside government offices. Although the protests may have quieted down, Jordanians are still demanding reforms. The hashtag debates, a forum organized by the online news site Hibr, is giving average Jordanians a voice. Let's take a look at a little bit of footage from one of these debates. Here we go. Now, the way that these are organized is they'll typically get a speaker to come in who knows something about a particular academic topic and can get into more detail about that particular area of expertise. While we're waiting for this video to play, I want you to know that the way it works is that audience members get a chance to take part in the discussion because it's being streamed online. Live tweets are displayed on a screen at the back of the room, and these thoughts are also brought into the conversation. Now, while these deliberations haven't led to any actual reforms yet, they have attracted the attention of the monarchy. Now, let's take a look at another video that illustrates this. And this particular one is of His Royal Highness Prince Hassan bin Talal, who actually attended one of these debates. He took part in a debate that tackled the economic and political impact of foreign aid on Middle Eastern countries. Political blogging is still an emerging medium in Jordan when compared with other Middle Eastern countries. However, many in the country are fearing that government reprisals, or they fear government reprisals as security forces constantly monitor online activities for any criticism of the monarchy. Joining us now via Skype from Amman, Jordan is Lina Ejelat. She's a co-founder and editor-in-chief of Hibr.com. Welcome, Lina, to the stream. First question for you, the work that you're doing with Hibr, is it designed to have an impact on the political system? And if so, what has been the impact thus far?
Is it designed to have an impact? Well, that wasn't our intention originally. I mean, our intention was to encourage and nurture a conversation and to encourage people to talk about things they don't normally talk about and that are not normally covered in the mainstream media. But I would like to think that yes, there is an impact, or it's part of the impact of so many activities taking place where Jordanians are engaging in politics in ways they never have before 2011. So.
Now, and talk to us a little bit about what some of the specific impact is. You say that it's engaging Jordanians in ways that they haven't been engaged prior to this year. How so?
Well, I know, for everybody who's watching from outside, Jordan has been relatively quiet compared to other countries where people have been demanding overthrow of their regimes. But for example, in Jordan, until last year, nobody would talk openly about a constitutional monarchy, about defining the authority of the king, about the role of the intelligence department in political life and their interference in political life. A lot of these issues were just things that Jordanians sometimes just avoid tackling in public arenas. So these are some of the issues that are now discussed very normally, very openly in different outlets. And I'm saying now as in May, June, but it wasn't so common in January. So,
well, let me ask you, May, you brought up the point of constitutional monarchy. The king actually raised this point himself in June, saying that this is something he would like to move towards, but he's the king. If he has an interest in such reforms, why haven't they taken place already?
Sorry, can you say that again?
I'm saying that the king actually raised this issue himself, but as the monarch, if he has an interest in these types of reforms, moving to constitutional monarchy, why have they not taken place already?
Well, it's interesting. It's a bit more complicated in Jordan because it's not the first time that the king talks about a constitutional monarchy. He's brought this up in 2005, I believe, in an ABC interview. The thing is that there are so many different forces at play, and while there is talk about reform in Jordan, sometimes actions on the ground indicate otherwise.
So, May,
yeah, I have a question about that. Considering that the youth makes up a huge majority of the country, how genuine do they think following up with your question, how genuinely do they think King Abdullah's claims that he's being constrained by the old guard is? Because we've seen that same claim by Bashar al-Assad as well.
Well, the thing is, it's hard to say what the youth think in Jordan because it's not like people generally share one sentiment. What we've seen, I think we've seen an interesting shift even in the conversation online. Post pre-March, I think March 25th and post March 25th, and that was when one of the biggest protests. When we saw violence for the first time in a protest in Jordan. And I think that now you see, even online, even on Twitter, people who would argue for the vision of, the regime and their approach and their talk about reform, and you would see others who, think that the regime and the government are not genuine in implementing the reforms they talk about. So it's a mix, really.
Quick question coming in on Twitter from Nicholas Slayton. He's saying, how much does a constitutional monarchy like Jordan's depend on the king versus the prime minister? Because as Nick is saying, Bakhit, the prime minister, Mar'ouf Bakhit, does not seem that popular right now. So how do they play in?
Well, he doesn't seem quite popular, but again, in general, I feel that the prime minister is not popular for a whole bunch of reasons that do not have to do with him personally. Like, I don't think that you'd get another prime minister within the current system and the current way things are run who would be very popular. So I think in order to restore trust in the government in general, people need to feel that the government is to be held accountable and responsible. And this is what's missing right now in Jordan, checks and balances. And this is really what the reform movement is all about, just making sure we have checks and balances and that whoever rules can be held accountable. This is not the case with the prime minister. We have a prime minister who says, yes, the parliamentary elections were there was interference in parliamentary elections in 2007. I was prime minister then, but I didn't know. He just generally does not take responsibility for things he's supposed to be responsible for.
Lena, if you're having these dialogues and they're engendering this spirit of communication and civic action within the community, but the king feels constrained in his ability to make reforms, what do you think is likely to happen on the ground in Jordan if you have a more politically involved citizenry but no frankly, a lack of actual reform on the ground?
And might I add, how much of a concern is mukhabarat in intervening in issues of free expression?
I think, in Jordan, quite often self-censorship was more the problem, and I feel that people always. I'm not saying the mukhabarat or the intelligence do not interfere in the media or in political life, but in general, people often would not discuss issues or tackle issues out of self-censorship, and this is what we've seen change in the past 6 months. Red lines are broken and people are talking more openly, and to be honest, I feel that I feel that there is still a lot of room for more political awareness and engagement and discussion and challenging the status quo. So I think in Jordan, it doesn't necessarily have to happen the sort of common way where it's only protests on the street. I feel that a lot of interesting work is being done in forums and debates and discussions and small groups getting together and small groups trying to organize. I mean, you're talking about a country where you have the majority that are under the age of 30, but for so many years in universities, students were discouraged from participating in any political activity. And I mean, with the exception of students who are active with the Islamic Action Front, almost nobody was, active in political parties, and I'm talking about students here, because of their concern and fear and a general culture that discouraged it. So this is starting to change, and this is very, very important.
Lena, thanks for taking the time to explain hashtag debates to us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And speaking of hashtags, we seem to be having some interesting tweets coming up on that topic.
Yeah, Lena was just saying there's a long road ahead, and Hot Conflict is agreeing with her on Twitter, saying moving from dictators to constitutional monarchy is not the true goal, merely a stepping stone towards maybe more reform.
Well, I think that's actually a very excellent point, and it's worth keeping in mind. Change takes time. If you have time, take a look at our website, stream.aljazeera.com. There you're going to find more videos and links to some of these top stories, including this one on the hashtag debates.
So since July 8th, thousands of protesters in Tahrir Square in Cairo have held an open-ended sit-in demanding that those involved in the killings of protesters during the 18-day revolution be brought to justice. Protesters reacted angrily after a TV address given by the Assistant Defense Minister Mohsen Al-Fangari warned that protests that disrupt public life will simply not be tolerated. Now, we have a tweet coming in from Zaki Hussein saying the problem is that SCAF is dealing with the revolutionaries as they are thugs, which, as he says, is an imitation of facts. Now, he's using this hashtag, NoSCAF, which is an acronym for the Supreme Council of Armed Forces. This is being discussed widely and trending in Egypt, but also in Europe and the US. And Lina Awardani is saying the tone of Fangari's speech is authoritative, patronizing, and scary at best. Hussam al-Hamlawi, who is an activist who's played a central role in the revolution in holding members of Mubarak's former government to justice, also tweeted in saying that during the speech, people were waving their shoes in the air as the speech was being broadcast in the square. Here are some photos of that have been tweeted into us. This is actually on his blog. This is a photo of people, as you can see right there, holding the shoes. And as Hussam puts it, they're denouncing the latest statement by the Supreme Council of Armed Forces. And right here he writes, which in effect constituted an official declaration of war on the actual revolution. Now there's one more photo that we want to share with everyone, which came into us and depicts a political cartoon on this guy's shirt. He is in Tahrir, and you'll notice this cartoon is made by Carlos Latouf, who's all the way in Rio de Janeiro, but I'm just going to go back and show you that it's essentially the same photograph, and Carlos created a new political cartoon marking the actual speech by Al-Fangari. Right here, he's depicting him as a rat that's roaring, and this has been tweeted and circulated a lot today. And when I asked him what compels him to create these political cartoons on Twitter, he wrote me back in one word, in short, solidarity. So for those of you who want to share stories with us, later in the week, we will be looking at how Sri Lanka's Tamil minority is coping 2 years after the end of the civil war. Of course, we want you to help us tell this story, so send us pictures, tweets, and videos using the hashtag AJStream.
I'm Baratunde Thurston, Director of Digital for The Onion, and I'm in the stream.
Mysterious blasts in the town of Abadan in Turkmenistan would have remained unreported had it not been for netizens who turned to social media to crowdsource information. Following the July 7th explosions, Turkmen internet users quickly began gathering and disseminating facts to combat the government-enforced media blackout. Social media activists questioned official statements that fireworks overheated and ignited a munitions warehouse. We found a couple of videos as we were looking online that give a really good example of what we're talking about here. Now you can see from this, there was obviously an initial explosion, but then you see a second, and listen for the sound. I mean, it's quite significant that these explosions seem to be happening in a multiplicitous fashion. There are a number of them happening. This one is particularly interesting. Listen closely. sounds like something is falling. You actually hear that sound, and then we have this video of an explosion. Now, unfortunately, we cannot independently verify these videos. However, what has been surmised is, for example, that last video is of a munition that had exploded, came back down to earth, and exploded again. Some people are reporting that Abadan was home to a Soviet-era military airfield that was used in the 1980s during the war in Afghanistan. This particular story is starting to get the attention of some other international media as well. Russia's Fergana news site has published images of what they allege to be the aftermath of the blast in Abadan. After days of denial, the government finally announced that up to 15 people had been killed in the blast, but they're still refusing to allow family members to reclaim the bodies. Reports collected by the independent website chronotm.org, which is managed by the Turkmen Initiative for Human Rights, says that the death toll could be as high as 200. Earlier, we spoke with the Turkmen blogger Ana Sultan about what happened in Abadan. For her safety, we've altered her voice, and we've also concealed her identity. However, this is what she had to say to the stream.
The victims told me horrifying stories about what actually happened. One of them told me that he was himself trapped into this disaster, and he has witnessed how houses have burned down and how he was himself affiliated. He was caught in this, almost caught in the fire, and he saw people dying in this event. And he said what he actually saw what was much more horrifying than what he actually put on the internet, because he felt he could not say, go out with all of the truth. He feared his personal security to tell all of it.
Now, joining us now to further discuss this is Chris Schwartz. He's the managing editor for NewEurasia.net, a leading citizen journalism website for Central Europe. Chris, thank you for joining us in the stream once again. It's great to have you back. Tell us a little bit about what's happening on the ground. Has the government allowed people to reclaim the bodies of the dead?
As far as I know, not. They have supposedly allowed people to go back into the town. Anna Sultan and the information she got had given the impression that there was a small-scale military force there as well to maintain order. Some of the population had also been evacuated. They were supposedly placed in university halls. I don't know what the status of them is.
I have a question, Chris. What's fascinating about the story is how the narrative's been changing by the government. You know, initially there were no casualties and this was a fireworks factory, and then 15 people are dead, and then there are reports of 200 people that have died from the diaspora. So why do you think the government feels the need to cover up this story?
Oh boy. Okay, so where to begin on this? So for one, Turkmenistan inherited an old Soviet era practice of denying or otherwise not publicizing any disasters, natural or man-made. It has a lot to do with publicity and saving face and so on. As time went forward, though, it had a lot to do with maintaining the position and the power of the elite who run the country, surrounding the president, of course. And so it has a lot to do with maintaining internal cohesion, not so much the outside world, as always, as what's going on inside.
Quick question to you, Chris. Now, we know, according to Reporters Without Borders, Turkmenistan is the third from the bottom of a list of, in terms of press freedom, so the lack of press freedom. And a quick look on the Open Net initiative says that in terms of filtering of the internet, politically, there's pervasive filtering. I don't know if you can see my screen. So the question is, we have people online saying that social media is the new and more powerful checks and balance method. Is that the case in Turkmenistan, and how central, a role has that played in telling this story?
Well, in Turkmenistan, it is probably the case at the moment. You have to remember that Turkmenistan's neighbor to the south is Iran, and Iran developed a very good policy to essentially co-opt, even colonize new media and social media. So for the time being, social media does present the best opportunity to check the official lines that are coming out from the government in Ashgabat.
Chris, how effective can social media be when you've got, according to our research, 80,000 internet users in a country of 5 million? It seems like there are only but so many people even online.
Yes. Well, okay, there's two factors to explain it quickly. Number one, internet access within the country is highly regulated. You can't even get to an internet cafe without showing a passport, for example.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's rather extreme.
Even as a foreigner.
Even as a foreigner, you'll be lucky to be able to get to an internet cafe as a foreigner. Actually, if you're a foreigner, usually you are tailed. Usually you have some surveillance officer with you at all times, especially if you're a journalist. But even if you're just a regular person. Peace Corps activists, for example, are stationed at one village, and they have a difficult time leaving that village, for example.
You know, I just want to ask you one thing just on that point, Chris. People in a lot of countries, the majority of a population might not even have a passport. Is it common to actually be carrying a passport in Turkmenistan?
Internal ID, yes.
Okay.
You have two kinds of passports, internal and external. You have to apply for external to leave the country.
Okay. But so please finish your thought about internet penetration and access there.
So quite a bit of it is coming from the outside, actually. So quite a bit is coming from neighboring Iran, Uzbekistan, even to some extent Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, and also, of course, around the world. You have the Turkmen diaspora, which is primarily composed of either exiles or the children of well-to-do families and government officials who are studying overseas, in fact, at American or Western universities. So that's the other side of Turkmen social media. When the explosion happened, it appears that quite a bit of the people who initially were trying to figure out the situation were people from the outside. There were Turkmens on the outside communicating with friends and family on the inside and putting information together that way. So there were some people on the inside also who were online, although they were not in Ashgabat, that's my understanding. But it was, at first, very much the Turkmen on the outside who were doing it.
Well, to that point, I was looking at the video of the explosion on YouTube, and there were about 2,000 views, and we're talking about a country of 5 million. How much is this information penetrating to people on the ground, you think?
At the moment, not very far. Number one, the people in Ashgabat and neighboring neighborhoods don't necessarily need the information. They saw firsthand the explosion. They had the munitions or whatever it was raining down on them. They don't need YouTube to tell them what happened. For the rest of the country, it's much more complicated. But what's more important in terms of the penetration information are the Turkmen who might be just across the border in Iran, who do have more internet access, who may have better proxies, who may be more experienced at this, and also Turkmen who are in Turkey, who basically are having a regular first world internet experience. And they may not be able to get the videos back to Turkmenistan because of bandwidth issues and security issues, but they can tell people, look, I saw what happened. You should see these videos. They're incredible. And that alone, that corrosive rumor effect, is very powerful.
Chris, we know that the Turkmen government did shut down the internet for a period of time. How did that impact the ability of people to get this story out?
Not a lot, actually. From what I understand, the internet blockade occurred primarily around Ashgabat, as opposed to the rest of the country, which may explain partially why there were Turkmen from inside Turkmenistan who also were on TE Swirler at the time and were reporting on it. So it wasn't that effective, it appears. I mean, I got the information through an SMS literally 2 hours after the explosion happened. It took us a few hours to get the information together to report on it, but I knew about it very quickly, and I'm in Europe. So the blockade did not work this time.
Chris, one question about the opposition. The Turkmen president recently called on exiled opposition to come home and said they should participate in the 2012 elections. Now, I know you're commenting, nodding your head. What's that about?
Saddam Hussein did the same tactic. If they're smart, they won't go back.
All right.
Oh, there you have it. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it, Chris.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. You know, this is a fascinating story. I mean, even as he was mentioning, they tried to shut down the internet, and the story is still getting out.
Yeah, and the level of repression of the media is just so interesting in how the social media blew up this story.
Yes.
Forgive my words.
Even with the small numbers, I think it's a testament to, even though the penetration rate's quite low, they can still have a voice and still influence
Absolutely, and they can be a voice for others. Well, you can exercise your own voice in this conversation by joining us online at stream.aljazeera.com. Use the hashtag AJStream. You can always join us at our pre-show at 1925 GMT. We'll see you online.